crimes and misdemeanors, which can be proven true or false. Then there's the category of statements which are uncivil, but the circumstances, in my view, warrant incivility. So, for example, I remember quite vividly during the 1980s, Professor Chomsky wrote a book called Turning the Tide on the U.S. wars in Central America. And the line which every person who read that book remembers, they don't remember all the footnotes and all the facts, but everyone remembers the line when Professor Chomsky called Jean Kirkpatrick, she was the UN representative at the time for the Reagan administration, the chief sadist in residence of the Reagan administration. Well, that was considered very uncivil. But my own experience has been that young people in particular, like myself, who was first reading works by Professor Chomsky, they yearn for persons in authority to speak the unvarnished truth and give expression to the moral indignation warranted by the occasion. There are moments that require breaking out of the constraints of polite discourse to sound the alarm that innocent people are being butchered while we speak due to the actions of our government. Now, these sorts of incivility shouldn't be a substitute for truth. And I don't think anyone would accuse Professor Chomsky of failing to argue his case or footnote it. But such a cry of the heart, a cri de coeur, is also within, in my opinion, the bounds of civil discourse. Thirdly, I've never really understood why polite incivility, the clever put-down, which the British specialize in, and is a staple of academic life, why the polite put-down should be preferred over impolite incivility. I was reading an article by Henry Louis Gates on the whole issue of political correctness and the speech laws on college campuses, speech codes. And he said, you know, these speech codes are kind of silly because that's not the real problem on college campuses. And he gave two examples, two hypotheticals, of talking to a black student at Stanford. Person A says, Levon, if you find yourself struggling in your classes here, you should realize it isn't your fault. It's simply that you're the beneficiary of a disruptive policy of affirmative action that places underqualified, underprivileged, and often under-talented black students in demanding educational environments like this one. The policy's egalitarian aims may be well-intentioned, but given the fact that aptitude tests show that African Americans don't perform as well, you probably don't belong here, and your college experience will be a long downhill slide. Person B says to the same student, out of my face, Jungle Bunny. And Gates says, surely there is no doubt which statement is likely to be more wounding and alienating. The fact of the matter is, I at any rate see no virtue to polite civility, which as Gates shows, can often be more vicious and hurtful, and which in its cleverness and wittiness is often testament to the lack of moral seriousness. Professor Christopher Hitchens used to be very adept at the polite put-down and the polite insult when he was on the left. And now he's equally adept at it when he's on the right, because there's no moral core. It's just a game of words, and I see no virtue in it. Then there is the case, in my opinion, of the ridiculous who are deserving of ridicule. If an academic or a public figure is a charlatan, he or she deserves to be reduced to ridicule. If there's no scholarship but simply theater and windbaggery, and you've demonstrated there's no scholarship but theater and windbaggery, then there's a time-honored tradition for shouting that the emperor is naked. So if Professor Elie Wiesel comes to your university, charges a lecture fee in the tens of thousands of dollars, and the subject of his lecture is that the secret of Auschwitz truth lies in silence. And then he goes on to say, words are a kind of horizontal approach, while silence offers you a vertical approach. You plunge into it. I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask the question, does Elie Wiesel parachute into his lectures? Because this is sheer nonsense. And why shouldn't we say it? Or Phyllis Chesler writes a book on the new anti-Semitism, and she wants to show what a dreadful phenomenon it is. So she writes, there is a thrilling permissibility in the air, the kind of electrically charged and altered reality that acid trippers or epileptics may experience just prior to seizure. Doctored footage of fake Israeli massacres has now entered the imagination of billions of people like pornography. These ideas, one can never be forgotten. It's as if the political equivalent of the AIDS virus has been unleashed into the world. To be a Jew is to live dangerously, on the margins, with an open, circumcised heart. You know, so I think it was perfectly warranted to write, acid trippers, epileptics, pornography, AIDS, circumscribed heart. One begins to wonder whether Chesler's magnum opus, Women and Madness, was autobiographical. Now, some of you may think that those comments were uncivil. But then I have to ask another question, and that's a serious question about the double standard. So August 6, 2000, the New York Times ran a review of my book, The Holocaust Industry. It was a full page in the Times, and the author described me and the book as bizarre, outrageous, paranoid, shrill, strident, indecent, juvenile, self-righteous, arrogant, stupid, smug, fanatic. And that was the first column. On February 7th, 2001, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, a German newspaper, quoted an American professor about me as follows: as concerns particular assertions made by Finkelstein, the appropriate response is not exhilarating debate, but tedious examination of his footnotes. Such an examination reveals that many of those assertions of Finkelstein are pure invention. No facts alleged by Finkelstein should be assumed to be really facts. No quotations in his book should be assumed to be accurate without taking the time to carefully compare his claims with the sources he cites. And then The Observer in 2006